More of The Real Story with your host, Jeanne Ives.
Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. It is my pleasure to now have on my show Brandon Straka. He's the founder of the Walkaway campaign, a former liberal Democrat supporter and Hillary Clinton voter. But then again, I repeat myself. In 2018, he put out a video that went viral about his decision to leave the Democrat Party. His movement has become a nationwide push to wake people up and get them to move politically. That is not easy to do. He speaks around the country, has sat for long-form interviews with conservative folks like radio show host Mark Levin, and he's been a guest on numerous other shows as well. I am pleased to speak with him today about his movement, his J6 prosecution, and how we can get more people to walk away. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me on The Real Story.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, you know what I found interesting is you grew up in rural Nebraska. Now, I grew up in rural South Dakota. So we have a little bit in common there, and I have Nebraska roots as well. It's just phenomenal to me that you had to walk away from the Democrat Party, because usually if you're from Nebraska, you're conservative to begin with.
Well, my family was all conservative. I grew up in a very small town, Catholic, conservative community. My parents are conservative. I have siblings who are conservative. But I wasn't. And I think, a big reason for that is because I'm a gay man. And the messaging that I received really early on in my life from Hollywood, from the entertainment industry, the music industry, from the left-wing media, that Democrats were the party that care about marginalized minority communities, and that Republicans are the party of greedy, self-interested, straight white people who hate everybody who isn't also a greedy, self-interested, straight white person. And, it was also a long time ago. Things were a lot different back then than they are today. But that's why I ended up kind of going down a different path initially than most of the people that I grew up with. And then, the path that I went on, the left just over the years became increasingly more and more radicalized and insane, and I'm one of many people for whom, I don't feel like I changed much, and the party left me. But I guess we can get into that.
Well, yeah, I would like to get into that, because typically it's maybe a culmination of a lot of maybe incidents that happen, but there's also usually some triggering point to make people that move off of one party into another. Was there a triggering point for you?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, in a very zoomed out sense, the triggering point was the election of Donald Trump. But more specifically, it was a number of things that happened right just before, during, and after his election. So I voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and this was coming off the heels of voting for Barack Obama twice and being a lifelong Democrat Party. I would just go in the booth and vote straight ticket Democrat, whether I knew who the people were or not, or, what was going on. Didn't even question it. Never would have considered voting for a Republican. And, when Donald Trump ran for office, initially I kind of thought it was a joke, like a lot of people. And then he started to pick up more and more steam and momentum. And then the media that I trusted, sources like CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Vice, BuzzFeed, etc., started churning out article after article saying that he was a bigot, a racist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, the second coming of Hitler, the most dangerous, mentally disordered, vile human being who's ever run for office. But they also kind of said, but don't worry about it too much, because he's got like a 3% chance of winning, and Hillary Clinton is going to win in a landslide. So when things didn't turn out that way, I was shocked and scared and devastated and confused. And I wanted to understand, number one, why would anybody vote for somebody who's as horrible as the media has, told me repeatedly that he is? And number two, how did the media that I trusted get it so wrong? And so my journey kind of began there, asking these questions. But the kind of most pivotal moment was in January of 2017, right around the time he was about to take office. I had gone on Facebook and posted that I couldn't understand how anyone could possibly vote for a man who was capable of mocking a reporter's disability in front of a cheering crowd. And that's when a woman named Diane, who was my babysitter when I was a kid, a staunch Christian conservative who I had had many battles with over the years, reached out to me privately on Facebook. And she just said, look, I'm not trying to start a fight with you. I'm just asking, have you seen this? And she sent me a link to a video entitled Debunking the Trump Mocked the Disabled Reporter. And for anybody who's not familiar, it's a compilation of footage that somebody had put together of Donald Trump throughout the years doing that exact same voice and that exact same gesture as he did at his rally that day when he was accused of mocking a reporter's disability. But the commonality in every instance was he was doing a voice and a gesture that he does when he's imitating anybody who's flailing because they're caught in a lie. And so it showed very clearly and conclusively that he wasn't making fun of that reporter's disability. He was making fun of the fact that that reporter who just happened to be disabled was flailing because he was caught in a lie. And so it kind of opened my eyes for the first time to the notion that the media that I'd been trusting was capable of intentionally creating a false narrative and spinning a moment out of context with the explicit intention of trying to manipulate my emotions and make me believe something terrible happened that didn't happen. And so that sent me on a long journey of research to understand, well, how often are they doing this and why? And ultimately, about 2 months later, after compulsively reading and researching and going back and watching full moments in full context, I realized that Donald Trump was not my enemy. The media that I had been trusting my entire life was my enemy, and that I could no longer abide by what they were peddling and what the Democrat Party were peddling. And I could no longer abide by the ideology of liberalism, which is built on a house of cards of false narratives. And so I walked away from all of it.
That's amazing. The media is so powerful in this country. They have so much power and they know it. That's how you get them spreading the misinformation about the Hunter Biden laptop. That's how you get 51 intel agencies putting out that memo because they knew they'd get picked up. They knew that that would influence voters' minds. It's so powerful and so destructive at the same time. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's one of the best distillations about the media bias that I've ever heard. I would say that in many cases, people get mugged by their own reality. So if the crime is happening, in the next town over, or even, on the opposite side of the tracks of the town that you live in, okay, it's not happening to you. But when you get mugged by your own reality, when crime hits you, when they decide to bail out somebody else's student loans on the backs of you, when your business gets shut down for nonsense. I think when you're told to mask when you know this is stupid, even if you're a liberal, I think that unfortunately so many people will not change politically until they're mugged by their own reality. And very, very few people do the in-depth sort of analysis that you did that led you to the walkaway movement. What from your other walkaway folks that you know and that you've brought in to this campaign, what were their triggering points? Because I'm at the very beginning of Gen X, or like the tail end of Boomer, but really the very beginning of Gen X, and you're towards the back end. And so many even would say that you appear to me to be a millennial. You're much younger than your age. So what is that age group looking at? What are they concerned about, and how do we get more walkaways?
Well, so I launched Walkaway then in May of 2018, 6 years ago, and I launched it as a testimonial campaign. So people began joining and making their video and written testimonials, sharing their stories why they're walking away. And we've had people of all age groups, backgrounds, walks of life, black, brown, white, fat, thin, young, old, gay, straight, trans, everything you can imagine. And we've grown at this point to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who've joined the movement and tens of thousands of testimonials. And the recurring theme in all of them is betrayal. The realization that this system, this ideology and this belief system that you had adhered to has been dishonest with you and manipulated and exploited you, usually for some sort of nefarious gain. And it's different for all different people. I mean, there's not one specific reason, but I can tell you kind of asked specifically about young people. We saw the biggest influx we ever saw of young people in the summer of 2020. When Black Lives Matter started burning America to the ground and rioting from coast to coast. Our numbers actually doubled that year. We went from around 250,000 to 511,000 over the course of that summer. And we were just being inundated by testimonials from people in their 20s, 30s, college age kids, and people just saying, this is not why I became a liberal. I mean, understandably, most people who, including myself, who sort of fall into the liberal camp and the liberal mindset usually do so with an intention of wanting to do something good for the world. They want to be a part of something that they feel like is making the world more just and equitable and fair, and providing more freedom to all different people, including allegedly marginalized people or truly marginalized people. But I think that when you feel like you're a liberal because you're fighting racism or perceived racism, and then all of a sudden you see this permissiveness for people in the name of black power or equity to go out and just torch our country and destroy everything, logical people say, this is not what I signed up for. And so that was a huge thing for us there for young people. But there's all different things that are driving people away, and certain issues drive away certain demographics, and we see that time and again. But I'd say in terms of young people, that was a huge issue that pushed a lot of people away.
So does your organization, not that you need to, I mean, you're just you're a movement really, but by any chance, do you do any polling? Do you have any polling about what's moving people off the Democrat Party? Is it illegal immigration? Is it inflation? Is it they can't buy a house? Is it the COVID still? I mean, is that still a reaction and a rejection of what happened then? I mean, mask mandates, vax mandates, you name it. I mean, what is it? Or do you do any polling that you know how to move that group? Because honestly, folks who work in the political sphere, we want to move that group off of the Democrat Party, because if we don't, it's going to hurt all of us if we have 4 more years of Joe Biden.
Sure. Well, yeah, we do polling, and consistently what we found are the top issues. I'll tell you the last one last, but the first one last. Mm-hmm. So the border is always a huge issue for all sorts of people. People are very concerned about the border, and it's particularly how that affects economy and crime. All of the issues that you said, government overreach as it pertains to shutting people's business down, the way COVID was handled. A lot of people were true believers about COVID. And then they started to see, and I think true believers that our government is looking out for us. And then it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Well, now it's 4 weeks. Well, now it's another month. Well, now we're going to come and tackle you and arrest you if we find out you're having parties. Now we're going to jail you if we find out you're going to church. Oh, you opened your business? We're going to come and shut you down and arrest you and send you to. I mean, this was so much more than people initially signed up for. But this may surprise you to find out, because conservatives, I'm speaking generally, not across the board, but conservatives ran scared away from the issue of J6 and a number of other things. And the number one thing consistently that we hear, people are most afraid of the weaponization of our justice system. And this isn't just because of what happened to Donald Trump or what they've seen with Steve Bannon or Peter Navarro or a number of people recently. When we asked the honest question going back years ago, consistently, the majority of people were saying, I'm terrified by what I'm seeing with the J6ers, and I'm terrified of what this government is doing to conservatives and the way we're being targeted by the justice system. That is the number one thing that people are afraid of right now.
People are afraid of their government. And speak to my audience if you could. I mean, you had your own sort of J6 persecution. You were given 3 years probation. It was probably pretty daunting there to have the entire force of the DOJ up against you, well known, a conservative icon that they would love to take down and denigrate. And they certainly tried. But I mean, tell us more about what happened to you.
Yeah, well, and it's much more than 3 years of probation, too, which not that that's any walk in the park. But I'll say that. So for anyone who doesn't know, I never entered the Capitol on January 6th. I was on Capitol grounds. I was a scheduled speaker at a permitted event that was supposed to take place on Capitol grounds. And when I started getting text messages telling me that people were going inside the building, or that people were seeing on the news that people were going inside the building, I started shooting a video. And I shot a video for about 10 minutes, walked up to the east side of the Capitol where things were very, very calm. There were literally zero police officers, zero on the east side grounds. Everybody was singing songs. Everything was very calm. I walked up to the top of the stairs. The doors on the east side of the Capitol were open on the east side of the Capitol, and a crowd of several hundred people. Some were trying to push their way in. Others were just standing there filming. I filmed for 8 minutes, and then a man came outside the building, got on a bullhorn, and said, "They've cleared Congress. Everyone left the building. Move out." I immediately turned around, walked down the stairs, and shot street interviews with people. Never entered the Capitol, never engaged in any violence, vandalism, theft, or destruction, and I didn't witness any violence, vandalism, theft, or destruction. But I uploaded that video to Twitter, and 2.5 weeks later, the FBI raided my home on the morning of Monday, January 25th at dawn, got me out of bed, put me in handcuffs, and a team of agents in tactical gear began stripping my apartment of my computers, my phones, my iPads, my hard drives, my thumb drives, my camera equipment, my clothing, while 2 other agents cuffed my hands behind my back, put me in a black car, and took me to jail. I sat in jail for several days in 23-hour lockdown, being told that I was charged with multiple felonies for what I had done on January 6th. And it wasn't until I got out of jail several days later that I met with my attorney and learned that the DOJ was accusing me of encouraging the crowd to storm the building and encouraging the crowd to steal a shield from a police officer. So they charged me with 2 felonies and a misdemeanor and threatened me with a 3rd felony of obstruction of an official proceeding. That's the felony that carries 20 years in prison. A 20-year maximum. And that's the felony that's basically being given to every J6er who refuses to take a plea deal and go to trial. They slap that on knowing that they're going to get you at least 4 or 5 years behind bars. We negotiated a plea deal. I ended up pleading guilty to a misdemeanor of disorderly conduct. In exchange for that misdemeanor, the government made it mandatory that I confessed to telling the mob to storm the building and telling the mob to take a shield from an officer. They would not negotiate on that. It was either, if you're going to take a plea deal, you're going to confess to doing that. And because of that, the media was then able to write hundreds and hundreds of articles about how the Walkaway founder had gone to the Capitol and encouraged the crowd to storm the building and attack police, and numerous other things. I welcome your audience to look at my video from January 6th and ask themselves if my video matches that description of events. Nonetheless, I took the plea deal, and I was then given, in addition to the time I spent in jail, which my lawyer told me, well, it's a simple misdemeanor that you're pleading to. He said nobody goes to jail on a first offense misdemeanor. So he said the judge is just going to give you time served and you'll be done. That's not how it went at all. So the judge, who is openly hostile and contemptuous towards myself and other Trump supporters, sentenced me to, in addition to the 3 days I spent in jail, 3 months of house arrest. So I had an ankle tracking monitor and I was not allowed to leave my home for 3 months. And then in addition to that, 3 years of federal probation, 60 hours of community service, the maximum fine of $5,000, a $500 restitution payment to be paid to the Capitol, and 6 weeks of court-ordered mental health services.
The problem is you weren't arrested in Chicago because you can get accused of murder, illegal guns, rape, carjacking, and you never would have been treated like that. Right.
Well, yeah, or I could have just simply burned Washington, D.C. down to the ground with a Black Lives Matter T-shirt, and they would have dropped all the charges, as they did for more than 90% of the people who were charged in the BLM riots of 2020.
Well, I'm glad that your polling actually is that people have the pulse on what is really at the heart of the problem here in this 2024 election. It's whether or not you're going to have a government that respects the rights of the citizens in a constitutional republic, or whether you're not. I mean, you're just going to have a bunch of oligarchs that run things on the economic side and a bunch of tyrants that run the systems on the government side. And I mean, this is it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening what they did during COVID. It's frightening what they did with J6. It's frightening what they continue to do when they go after conservatives. and religious people. So, I mean, Brandon, thank you. I had no idea that was the other part of your story, because when I was researching this, I just pulled up the CNN article. What? He did that?
Yeah, no, it gets so much worse too. I mean, there's so much more to it. We'd have to sit here for 3 hours to kind of unpack all of it, I think. But there was a time once where the purpose of the media was to hold power accountable and to actually challenge the government, to prevent the government from becoming tyrannical against its citizens. And what's happening now is, I think, hands down, the most horrific thing I think that's ever happened in the history of our country, because the media is actually working on behalf of the government. They're working hand in hand on all of this. I can tell you, I have been the subject now, with no exaggeration, hundreds of articles about my involvement, that's in air quotes, involvement on January 6th. I have never had a journalist reach out to me and ask for my quote, for my side of the story, to ask me if I had any comment to make on what the article was about. What they do is they take any documents that the government writes, and the government writes the most salacious, horrendous, exaggerated, hyperbolic, and blatantly flat out false commentary in their charging documents and their sentencing documents. And then the media just reports it. Like, for instance, in my case, my case was interesting. I was never indicted by a grand jury. So a lot of people don't know this. Understandably, I've learned a lot about our justice system through this. There's two ways in which you can be arrested. You can be arrested because a grand jury indicted you after they heard some evidence. And by the way, that's not even, I mean, to get indicted it's so easy to get indicted because you don't have defense during an indictment. It's just a prosecutor saying this person did this, this person did this, this person did this. And the grand jury says, great, let's indict him. And then now you have to defend yourself. But the other way you can be arrested is on what's called a complaint. And a complaint happens when an actor within our judicial system goes to a judge and basically requests an order to have you arrested. And that's all that happens. So in my case, that's what they did. They had one FBI agent draft an 8-page complaint and go to a judge and request an emergency order to have me arrested and charged with multiple felonies. And the DC judge said, sounds good to me. And the reason why this is relevant is because when they do that, what's different about a complaint and an indictment is indictments are oftentimes just very bare facts. You're being indicted on this charge, and this charge. A complaint allows you to create a story. So this FBI agent was able to create an 8-page story that says, 3 weeks before January 6th, Strzok said this, he did this, he tweeted this, he did this. Then he went to the Capitol and he encouraged the mob to storm the building. And then he encouraged the crowd to do this. And the media gets it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what CNN wrote. That's exactly what they wrote. They wrote everything that was in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that all came from the complaint.
That all came from one FBI agent who created that story.
Well, I mean, it's just, you're right. This is so shameful. Listen, you're right. I could talk to you all day. I don't have all day. I wish I had all night to talk to you. But Brandon, you're going to be in Illinois, in Geneva this Wednesday as part of the Pints and Politics that the Three-Headed Eagle Alliance is hosting. And it's at Eaglebrook Country Club. That's in Geneva. And if you go to Three-Headed Eagle Alliance, you can go there and get tickets. And then you can talk to Brandon yourself and listen to more of his story. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. I absolutely appreciate your fight and what you're doing. And you know what? We're going to win in the end. The truth will win.
I believe that too. And I really do encourage anybody listening to please come out and hear. There's so much more to the story I want to share with you. And so I think that's Wednesday, June 19th. And people can go to threeheadedeaglealliance.org for more information about the event. Please come out and see it because I'd love to share this with all of you.
Great. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.